Today on the show, I'm looking at how to bake your mesh into a displacement map you can use to add micro details without messing up your object's topology. This so proppers the object's general shape, and when I turn on rendered viewport, the displacement map drives the height. First, let's have a look at how I make the maps from mesh. Here I have a plane that I've subdivided and cut some panel loops into. I haven't given anything depth yet because how much depth you give an object at this stage needs to be noted. First I'll go into edit mode and then select an edge ring. In the select menu, I go to select loops and choose edge rings. Then I'll extrude the faces by 0.03 units. Because the plane is sitting flat at 0 on the z-axis, that extrusion drops the mesh to minus 0.03, which makes it the lowest point in the world space of the object. Next I'll add a bevel modifier and set the amount to the same as the depth. This gives the displacement map a good depth gradient to work with. In geometry, I find that miter outer always gives a nicer bevel result when set to arc. Finally, I'll bump the segments up to 4. In the shading workspace, I'll add a new material and name it. Then I'll add a geometry node. This will reference the object data that we can make a map from. Next I'll add a separate XYZ node. It does exactly what it sounds like. It splits the object position into its X, Y, and Z values. I'll plug the geometry position into the vector input, and as I cycle through the dimensions, it'll show X and Y, but since the object has a pretty mild Z depth amount, we need to correct the range, otherwise we won't see it. So I'll add a map range node. The map range node isn't as scary as it seems. It's just compressing the data into a range that you set. From min is the lowest point of your mesh. From max is the highest. To min is basically saying that the lowest depth in the map will be black, which is a value of 0. And at our max height, we want the map to have a value of 1, or be white. So if I set from min to minus 0.03, that becomes the lowest and therefore darkest part of the range. And if I set from max to 0, then 0 becomes the highest or lightest part of the range. If you want to add parts that poke up into the positive Z dimension, all you have to do is take note of how tall the objects poking up are. I went ahead and added some geometry that protrudes into the positive Z depth. Before I add the separate XYZ shader setup to those as well, I'll add a few loops at the base of the object and scale them to soften the transition into positive space. I'll also make sure the base of this mesh sits flush with the plane face. Next I'll give the primary object a weighted normal modifier. Then I'll select the others and make the primary object the active object. With it active, I'll use copy to selected to transfer that modifier to all of the meshes. Once the shading is set up, I'll also transfer the separate XYZ material to these objects. Then I'll turn rendered viewport back on. And you'll notice that the protruding meshes aren't showing. And that's because the from max is still set to 0. To make these new meshes visible, I'll need to find out where they sit in world space. I'll select one of them, go into edit mode, and pick the top vert. Then I'll press N to open the sidebar and switch the transform readout to global. Here I can see the new from max value. Back in the shading workspace, all I have to do now is enter this value of 0.1 into the from max setting, and it will recalibrate the full range of the meshes with that shader applied, making the lowest point the darkest and the highest point the brightest. I went ahead and added a mesh plane with the same X and Y dimensions as our depth map meshes. After placing it in the scene, I'll move it to just under the lowest point. With that in position, I'm ready to bake the height map. Back in the shading workspace, I'll select the new bake plane, add a new material and name it. Then I'll add an image texture and set it to 32-bit float. This ensures the full range of the material is captured by the texture. With the image in place, I can start setting up the bake. I'll set the bake type to emission and enable selected to active. For the extrusion height, I'll make it slightly longer than the full Z range of the meshes, which in this case is 0.135. With the bake plane selected, I'll drag select the other meshes and click bake. Make sure the image you created is highlighted or the bake won't start. Once I have the image, I'll pack it so it saves with the next scene save. Next, in the material settings, I'll set it to displacement only. The height map needs a displacement node to convert its grayscale values into actual displacement data. I'll plug the height map into the displacement height input and set the mid-level to 0. Then I'll set the scale to the actual Z depth of the bake mesh, which in this case is 0.13. I'll hide the mesh I baked the depth from, then select the plane I baked to. This mesh needs more polygons for the displacement to work properly, so I'll give it a multi-res modifier with linear subdivide applied 6 times. Next, the mesh needs shade smooth so it isn't faceted. With that done, I'll plug the displacement node into the material output to displace the mesh. Hopefully this helps you optimize your height map bake process and speed up your workflow. If you'd like to support the channel, leave a like and subscribe for more Blender Bitstream. Thanks!